Alright, so we'll watch a quick video on crown amps and a good way that we can configure them, which gives you more options. So there's two ways to do it from the front panel, or there's a USB input on the back that we can use Audio Architect, which is the software that we use to program like VSS stuff.
In this video, we'll walk through the DSP options that are available in the CDI series amplifiers. We will be using Audio Architect, which can be downloaded from audioarchitect.harmanpro.com. If this is the first time you've launched Audio Architect, then you'll need to install the USB VID drivers for the software to detect your amplifier. See how to do that by clicking on the link below. After your amplifier has been detected, you will see it in the Discovered Devices drop-down menu. Click and drag it to the Room window. If you're not already online, click the Go Online button. Click R to receive settings from the device, or S to send settings to the device. With your CDI amplifier online, double-click on the amplifier icon. This will open the signal path panel, showing the options available to program. Since both channels are identical, we will only focus on channel path 1. Double-clicking on the input icon will open the input settings for that channel. You'll see 3 input modes: stereo, sum, channel 1 and channel 2, and input Y. Stereo gives you 2 independent channels. Sum channels 1 and 2 will take a stereo input signal and sum it together. It then places the sum signal on both output channels, giving you a 6 dB boost to your input signal. Input Y takes the signal connected to input 1 and routes it to the second channel of the amp. This Y feature takes place in the DSP, so the channel 1 knob controls both amplifier outputs. Keep in mind that all of these options are also available via the front panel of the amplifier. You also have pink noise available here as well. The next option is output voltage, giving you the option to select 70 volt or 8/4 ohm for each channel. The default is set to 8/4 ohm. This option is also available via the front panel, listing 8/4 ohm as low Z and 70 volt as high Z. The next option is the output mode, which allows you to change the amp to bridge mono if needed. Next, we'll look at the first of the 2 EQ options. This particular option allows changes to the input EQ settings. This is where you'll make EQ changes to the incoming full-range signal, pre-high pass and low-pass filter. You can also enable low and high shelf filters here if needed. There are 6 parametric EQ filters available between 20 Hz and 20 kHz. There is a Q setting to vary the range of the frequency point selected. There are also faders to boost or cut an EQ point by plus or minus 15 dB. This feature is only available in the software. The next option is the crossover. You can set the amp for bi-amp mode or configure each channel individually. The crossover tab will open up first for bi-amp applications. Channel 1 will always control the lows, and channel 2 will always control the highs. Clicking on the Independent tab will allow you to configure each channel individually. Each channel has high-pass and low-pass filters with a variety of roll-off options between 20 Hz and 20 kHz. The Enable buttons turn them on or off. The bandpass gain fader will allow you to boost or cut by plus or minus 15 dB. You can also invert the polarity of each channel if needed. Anything in blue corresponds to channel 1, and anything in red corresponds to channel 2. Any options in the Independent tab can only be configured with the software. The crossover tab has limited options via the front panel. The next option is the second of the 2 EQ options. The Out EQ is located post high-pass and low-pass filters. This gives you the ability to EQ within the frequency ranges set up in the crossover section. There are 8 available parametric EQ points, and also a Q option to span a range of frequencies. There's also a fader to boost or cut each EQ point by plus or minus 15 dB. This is only available in the software. The delay settings allow you to set a delay time for each channel independently. This can be set by seconds, feet, or meters. Delay is also available via the front panel, but can only be adjusted in seconds. The last option in the signal path panel is the limiter, which can be set independently on each channel. There are 4 limiting options available. The default option is off. There is also minus 3 dB, minus 6 dB, and minus 12 dB. This feature can also be set via the front panel of the amplifier. To store your settings, click the Store button, name the configuration, and choose a preset location. If you have any questions regarding DSP configuration, please visit www.crownaudio.com.
Alright, so from this front panel, you've got your select enter, you've got a previous, and you've got a next button. So up in the left-hand corner, you've got channel 1, channel 2, and then it'll show which mode you're in, preset mode or configuration mode. So to enter configuration mode, you have to hold down select enter, then hit up, and then select enter again, and you'll switch from preset mode to configuration mode. So you can store like 20 some odd presets here, in which to configure all those is what we just watched. You have to do that when you're logged into the USB through Audio Architect. So when everything gets switched over, so from the front you can switch it. You know, most everything that we saw as far as basic settings you can do from the front panel. So you could switch channel 1 and 2 from low Z to high Z. From, you know, low Z would be 8 ohm, high Z would be 70 volt. You can switch the inputs, you know, whether you're doing, you know, parallel or bridged mono mode. You can set the limiter, you know, basic settings like that. You know, some of the tone shaping and sculpting settings with the EQs, that all has to be done internally. What I do like about the feature logging in is you can do a front panel lockout on here, which you can only do in the software. You can't do that from the front panel. I've gone on service calls before, which luckily, I mean, nothing got, you know, screwed up or blown out, but you know, where we've got 70 volt systems and something happened where somebody was touching something and switched over channels 1 and 2 from, you know, high Z, which they should have been, to low Z. So be able to lock out the front panel, you know, basically everything on here can just be inactive and they just have the volume controls. So, you know, going forward, especially if it's in a high traffic area, you know, if it's in a locked rack where people aren't going to be screwing with things, you know, we might not need to do something like that. But there's a lot of people that, you know, like to touch things and when they shouldn't. So.
You're looking at me when you say that.
Well, you know. All right, so we've got a few different connections for amps and speakers. You know, so if we're putting the speaker output, you know, on here, we're going to have a Phoenix connector, which is going to look like this, and that's, you know, you put it in wherever it's saying assign. So, you know, common, and we're going to go to 70 volt. You screw it down, it locks in place. Something like this, we're going to use what's called Spade Connectors. Some people call them fork connectors. They make different sizes depending on different gauge wire. So you have to judge what gauge wire you're using and see what's going to fit in the slot. So basically what you do is strip back the wire, shove it in there so the front of the wire basically comes out a tiny bit, crimp it down. So you've got your left and right, or channels 1 and 2, put it in under, and screw it down. The nice thing about these two is if you've got one on each pair, you can do the same thing as the banana plugs and link, you know, multiple ones easily, especially if you flip one around backwards and then one forward, you know, or you could even go up and down, then tighten it, and you can fit, you know, multiple speakers on these. This is a much safer, better connection than just laying the wire in there, because the wire in there, you're never going to be able to wrap it totally around the screw. It's not really, you know, it's not a great connection. So always, if you have an output like this, always use the fork or the Spade connectors. If you're linking multiple speakers, anytime you're doing something like this too, if you're running a wire output, you know, from the volume control or the amp and doing it here, you know, same thing. Always use wire nuts. I've had so many service calls over the years just from tape that's come off and, speakers have fallen off just because they weren't, terminated the way they should have been. So anytime you're making a connection like this, always use wire nuts. You know, the same thing for different gauge wire and for how many wires you're linking together. They make different sizes. The other connectors we use sometimes are called butt splices or butt connectors. So if you're doing a splice, basically, you know, not with the speaker, but if this was the same wire and you cut it and you're trying to extend it, especially if you're, if you need to tape something up and don't want, you know, so you got this huge connection here, you know, with these two wires, and then you need to tape something up, that's going to be obviously a much fatter tape wad, you know, let's say, than, you know, if you're doing something like this. So same thing, you'd strip back about 1/4 inch, put it in both sides, crimp it on both sides to make sure
Do they
it's
make
tight.
male and female spade connectors, so if you were to leave them all the same, you could unplug and plug the speaker back in without cutting it?
Do they what?
Male and female spade connectors, like the slip-on ones?
Yeah.
You could do them all that way.
Yeah, they do that, yeah, kind of like these things.
So the dolphin connectors too, right?
Yeah, so that's what I was going to get to next. Yeah, the technical term for these are called B connectors. Dolphin and Elk are the two big companies that make these things.
Surf and turf.
Surf and Turf, yes.
Nice.
Wow.
These guys, I typically wouldn't use these for speakers or anything that's passing a lot of voltage. You know, if you're splicing RS-232, IR, you know, stuff like that, I mean, this would be the typical mode. I mean, something small, you know, if you're only passing a couple watts through here, you know, these are fine. But I wouldn't use these for anything that's sending high voltage through. You know, I always tend to use, you know, the wire nuts with twisting those things together. But I can't stress enough connectors and terminations. I mean, that's so crucial to everything we do. And many times I've been on many service calls to fix things just because stuff wasn't, you know, terminated properly or you know, tight enough connections. So, you know, if you're using an amp, like I said, don't stick the wire in there and screw it down. You know, make sure you stock your tool bag or whatever with different sizes of 4 connectors or spade connectors, and you know, and wire nuts, because we use them, you know, every single install, every job you're on.
John, you had a case this week where you had to re-terminate a touch panel because it was all locked up.
Oh yeah, I mean,
Just-
I don't know if that was the actual case. It was in Bayshore. The room B, the Aurora panel was, I mean, it was operational, but wasn't controlling anything. So obviously I restarted it. Didn't happen. And kind of as a last ditch effort, I just pulled it off the wall to take a look at the back of the connection. And I just pulled it off and restarted it from there, just reseated it, and it came back and it was controlling. So I don't know if it was a bad RJ45 connection. I just re-terminated it and just plugged it back in. So I don't necessarily know if that was the case, but did the trick.
A lot of times it is. So it's, we see a lot of failures for termination reasons.
Yeah, for years, I mean, I'd go on installs, and the way when our company was smaller, you know, it was structured kind of different. We'd have like an install team, and then basically I would go in at the end of almost every job we did to do the final wrap up and train the client. And so many times I would go to, you know, to be testing the system at the end of the day, you know, and testing, you know, balance out the TVs and stuff, and not getting anything. And I mean, literally 95% of the time, it just came down to bad Cat 5 heads. So if you're doing Cat 5 heads, especially if you're doing it on both sides, you know, same thing. I can't stress enough, you know, having an RJ45 tester and testing the lines. Same thing for troubleshooting. You know, if you walk in and you're not getting internet, you're not getting video to a balun, I mean, the first thing you should be trying is sticking a tester on both sides to make sure that the you know, the cable is, and the nice thing about the testers is it shows you, you know, it shows you if pins are reversed, shows you if there's a short in it, you know, it'll say open or pass or fail, you know, depending on which one you have. But, you know, the right tools are essential to making, you know, the job smooth and to being able to do things. You know, if you don't have a Cat 5 tester, you know, you're not gonna know if anything's working, you know, or you know, you might be racking your brain because, you know, you've got eight wires in a Cat 5 jack, but, you know, say to a balun, you know, like a VGA balun, you're only using 6, you're not using all 8, so you're passing video, you know, but you might not be passing audio because that's on that last pair of wires. So, you know, without a tester, you're not going to know, you know, if something's shorted or reversed, you know, unless you really look at it. So having the right tools, you know, in that regard is essential. And terminations, take your time with terminations. Don't just jerry-rig things. And make sure things are connected. You know, a couple days ago, we were at a job where a guy's camera wasn't working. So I go up, I take the camera off, and right behind the camera, it was a network camera. The RJ45 wasn't plugged in. So I would assume that it was plugged in initially, but it just didn't snap in. So same thing, you know, a lot of times with these connectors, when you crimp them down, especially when you crimp down a lot of them, after you use your crimp tool, they stay pretty low like that. So you can plug it in, and unless you hear a click, it's not locked in. So what you have to do is kind of take it, bend it up a little bit like that, and it'll always lock and snap in. But you have to make sure when you're connecting something that you hear a snap. You can even pull it back to make sure. You know, otherwise it's, you know, there's a good chance it's going to fall out. Which, you know, I think was the case the other day, why the camera wasn't working. So, one of the other things I saw in the field a couple days ago, something like this. We talked about this one of the last sessions, and we've got an RCA on one end, we've got an XLR on one end, and we have the white and the red, so the two hot legs, you know, going to pin 2, and then we have the ground going to pin 1. So, one of the last sessions, you know, we talked about not combining left and right. Does this work? Does this pass audio? Does it sound okay? Yes, it does. In the long term, can it cause damage to an input because you're